Welcome back to Kin in Line. I'll make this part 70. We start here with a drawing I did in Paris in the Tuileries gardens. So I'd studied fine art in the late 70s, mid to late 70s, and knew quite a lot theoretically about the art of Europe particularly. So it was great when Anne's father, as a wedding gift to us in '83, funded our sort of 2-week trip to Europe. We did a auto tours bus sort of trip with a lot of young people, and I was able to sketch quite a lot of stuff. And this fountain in the Tuileries gardens came up quite nicely even after I painted it, even though it's on very fine sort of paper. But I quite like the very loose technique I've used here. And this was an attempt at capturing something of the Notre Dame Cathedral, which recently burnt down, sadly, or the roof anyway. Apparently it's been replaced a few times, so at least the bulk of that is still in one piece. So our trip took us to Paris, down to somewhere on the Riviera, and then through to Italy. And we stopped at Pisa, went down to Rome, Florence, Venice, and back up through North Italy. And this one is actually en route north. I remember this castle on this sort of hill, sketched from the bus as we drove along. This is a quick drawing I did of the woman who was our sort of guide. I think she was a teacher who did this during the holidays or something. Her mouth looks somewhat battered there. These are a bit stuck together. So this was one of our traveling companions, mostly from the US, Australia, New Zealand, I suppose, a couple from the UK. And I think there was only one other South African couple. And this guy had a very distinctive nose. So I've got two takes of him. But here again, this is what you can't do with a camera is 2 images like that. Who would think to do that? But in the drawing, and particularly this watercolor, which really works quite well, despite the paper being conspicuously not watercolor paper. Unfortunately, I'd like to have another look at it. Oh, gee, takes an age. Imagine if your eyes took that long to adjust. So this was on that road trip heading north, I think, out of Italy into Switzerland. And again, I just watercolored the landscape later, having sketched a very quick sketch of the hills. Now, unfortunately, these are still together, so we're going to see stuff shining through. But basically a very quick one of mountains up into the Alps, I guess. It's quite a nice, very quick sketch. Church and mountains, but yet it captures something of this, the character of the place. Another quick one, I actually really need to perhaps watercolor this one. Using felt tip pen here for a quick mountain scape. And another mountain scape. The essential shape of fir trees, which we're used to in South Africa seeing as plantations, but I think they're pretty much indigenous to Europe, so they must occur naturally in places there. Just one of the chaps. And then we went to the land of the windmill, Holland. And I have to confess that I thought of Rembrandt as I did this, and he would not have had to contend with those electricity pylons. So this would have been looking across one of the many dikes. And then we got up close to one of these windmills. Sadly, the one in Cape Town burnt down during the fires a year or so ago. But apparently it is being restored. It's been there also since about the 17th century. So it's one of the real historical monuments, records of Dutch presence in South Africa since 1652 or earlier even. I also had a whole series of little pages to sketch on. So first I did this little cartoon-like thing of me putting up a tent, because we slept in tents most of the time. But occasionally we were booked in at a sort of, what do they call them? Well, like a hotel, I guess. And for me, having studied a bit of architecture, I did a quick one of the Duomo in Florence, Brunelleschi's masterpiece, which I definitely didn't do justice to. I should have focused on it instead of this far less well-known building. This was from our campsite overlooking Florence. Quite a nice drawing, even though I've since Googled it and found it's not as famous a church with a kind of an onion dome. Nonetheless, still quite a nice record. And of course, wherever you went, there were tourists, and as one does, one sketched them. And this guy looks just so touristy. He's got his little brochure or something. This may look like a tourist, but in Italy and Rome in particular, I think in Florence too, there are so many statues, and some of them like dating from Roman times. And this is one of them. And in Rome, when in Rome, visit the Pantheon, which was a pagan temple from about 2,000 years ago, with a hole in the middle of a domed roof. There is a name for that, which I'll forget. But it had these incredibly ornate columns, and this was the top of one of them, which I sketched. So there was like a facade, entrance facade. And a couple more tourists. Quite like this one. This one's defying the gravity of the situation. He's refusing. Got to lasso it somewhere and then drag it in. Anyway. And then I think this might have been when we were in Holland. This guy looks like he has a northern look to him. Couple of windmills. Not that great. Went to a place where these clogs, I wonder if they still sell them. These were hanging for sale, you know. Proper handcrafted wooden clogs. That's one I would have liked to have had a photograph of. And this guy could be French, not Dutch. A gendarme, maybe. This chap was definitely Dutch. Scape, they call him, cheesehead. And we actually bought a thing of Gouda cheese wherever we went, Rotterdam or somewhere. And a warm up as well, and then on the way back, well, that's before we get there, let's just look at some of these. Somewhere tucked behind here are some of the people I shared this journey with. I've got quite a few sketches of them. This was one of the guys. Very much like being back in the army. Okay, yeah. Yeah, now this guy I remember from Australia. He boasted that he preferred activating alcohol than actually going to see the sights. So him and his mates often just hung around with a campsite where the bus was left and just drank chateau cardboard. Anyway, I think I'll leave it now and we'll have to return to this the next time.